Welcome to the U.S. Chess School, my friends. I was in a non-online version of this myself when I was a kid. It was a great opportunity for me. I hope it's for you too. It's also a cool thing to meet other kids that are around the country that are doing something. It's kind of interesting. They end up leading interesting lives. You keep in touch with them. So whether you turn into a professional chess player or not, this is a beautiful, I'm going to tell you, this is a beautiful thing that you're participating in. Now, as always, I'm going to do a little bit of blah, blah, but we're going to go into some practical examples today of something I'm going to talk about. And so before I hit the blah, blah button on myself, I'm going to introduce this position. This is white to move. Maybe just a basic question. What should white do? What's the rough evaluation of this position? And so while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to talk a little bit. In my last presentation here, and in all these presentations, I tried to give you something I wish I had. I talked about some of the lessons I've been having with my Soviet coach. And the Soviet coach is a cruel master to me. Not an easy character, man. Not an easy guy, man. Not an easy guy. And as we talked about last time, one of the things my Soviet coach is telling me is that I am very poor in separating the tactical from non-tactical decisions. And so let's try to get inside the Soviet's mind and see what he's saying. There are a lot of positions where you're just going to be able to follow your intuition. And there's not actually that much that you are going to be able to calculate. And in those positions, if you start thinking forever because you're interested in the position and chess is interesting and you start meditating on it and thinking deeply about what's going to happen, it's a terrible, terrible mistake. The Soviet is telling me I'm blowing. And I just had this terrible tournament, probably the worst in memory. I just had this worst in memory tournament for myself. And after the tournament, I came up with a narrative of telling myself, hey, the reason I did so bad is that I didn't have the energy to play in the final hours, so in this game, I blunder at the very end. And that story about what happened in the tournament is certainly part of what happened. But what the Soviets telling me, and it's definitely true, is where I really blew it was not giving myself enough time for the positions that do become tactical, and instead spent a lot of time on positions that aren't actually tactical positions. So positions that I should be playing a move, forcing myself to play a move within 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes at the tops if I'm trying to come up with a plan. But even in positions where you're trying to find a plan, ultimately you're going to be playing with your intuition. That's what the Soviet's telling me, and I think he's right. And you just got to roll. You have to force yourself to roll with it. Because you will need time for the positions that do become very tactical. Okay, now let me just give an update while we're talking about this. Kostya's out in Vegas playing along with a bunch of other people. He stank up the dojo too. I stank up the dojo real bad. He stunk it up in round one. It's not easy out there, my friends. It is a very competitive chess environment, tactically especially. You kids are getting stronger. It's just a fact of life. So the old guys are having a hard time. David Bruce is out there, a couple other people who have taught on this U.S. chess school. So they are playing, I think, they might be getting ready to play. I think it's round 5. Just wanted to give that update. Okay, so would anyone like to say anything about this position? If you'd like to. Put a little exclam next to whatever thought you have, and I'll call on you. Always kind of an interesting thing. Just also, just to give a sense of what you think white should do and what you think the evaluation is. And remember, what we do in this position exactly. Rohit just came. He's asking, what should I do? The question is just basic. It's white to move. What should he do? And, what is the rough evaluation of this position? If you would like to say something, I like to follow this little tradition we've got. You put a little exclam in the chat and I'll call, and you can just chat at me. And that way you can say whatever you want to me in the chat. And if you don't want to get called on, you don't have to get called. I understand. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I am going to go through several of these examples. We got one comment about this being an IQP. Absolutely. Here's an interesting comment. Tough to play for white. Seems inevitable to get an isolated pawn, but not easy to generate any play. DC and knight b4, d5. Okay. All right, a lot of ideas. So let me go and say, let's bring in Austin. Austin wants to say something. I think he might have an interesting point. So here we go, Austin.
I thought white should play a3 because knight c6 is probably preparing to take on c4 and then play knight b4 and d5. And then black has a very solid grip on the d5 square. But if we play a3 and then preventing knight b4, now if black does the same thing, the knight is unable to get to the d5 square. So we might be able to play d5 and get rid of the isolated pawn. And black, if he tries to put a blockade there, now when we take it, he has to take back with the pawn. So black gets an isolated pawn too.
Okay, and a3, I want to say a very typical and good idea in these kinds of positions. What would you do after rook c8, though? Threatening d takes c4.
I could just take on d5, right?
Okay, let's try it out.
Knight takes, and then something like bishop. Oh, taking on d5?
Well, I thought that's what you said. You want to take on d5, right?
No, with the pawn. But after knight takes d5, I was considering going bishop d2 instead.
Bishop d2. Okay. Yeah. Okay, all fair. And, well, yeah, okay, this is interesting. I guess, you'd have to contend with things like bishop f6, but totally a thought to play this way. Okay, good, Austin, good. Thank you. I think that's a totally reasonable plan. So let me tell you guys a little story. Now, by the way, let me say that one of the fascinating things that the Soviet has taught me is that oftentimes when you take forever on a move, what it shows is that your rhythm has stopped and there's like something wrong has happened. And definitely that's the case here in this position. I have played the opening poorly and my opponent has just played knight c6. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh, no, I'm not that happy in the position. Let's talk a little bit about the isolated queen pawn in general for a second. So, the isolated queen pawn can be a great thing. And one reason is because you have more space because you have that big fat center pawn. Maybe you have a lead in development. And like the Soviet pointed out, a lot of times the black queen is a victim. And you could see that victimhood. Let's say if black had played knight bd7 and we get a variation like this, you can definitely see that the queen is unhappy on d8 and white, I think, is better in this position. So I spent an amazing 11 minutes on this position. And the interesting thing that the Soviet yelled at me about is, okay, you're unhappy. Of course, you're going to get unhappy in the position. But when you think about it, am I calculating stuff here? Kind of, but not really, right? Like the plan that Austin gave, fine. It's a little weird. It feels unhappy to play bishop d2. It feels like a concession, and it probably is a concession. But, white has to get over it at this point. White has to get over it and not think forever. Just come to the realization that after knight c6, I'm not doing great. Now, the move I played, not a terrible move, It doesn't really change anything after rook c8 because black has the dc4 threat. It doesn't change anything. So I spent 11 minutes. That was my first tank in the position. All right, now let's do another position here. I took, and one of the reasons I was tanking forever, by the way, this is round one, so I'm like playing down, I'm expected to win, all this stuff. And one reason I spent forever on the whole rook c1 move was I was like, oh, dude, in this position, the guy's going to be able to play this. And then I don't see much better, you know, than this. And I don't want to draw, and I'd have to make some kind of concession, maybe taking on e7, you know, something that I just don't want to do because I don't want to trade pieces because I have the isolated queen pawn. And I've invested a lot of time in this bishop. So I was terrified of that. But then my opponent surprised me and played knight cb4. All right, again, let's use this as a practice position. What should white do? Was this a bad move, knight cb4? Give it a second. If you want, if you have an idea, please put an exclam in the chat. And maybe you just want me to read off your chat. You're too shy to come on the show. That's okay. I'll read it off. Yeah, so this is white to play. Move 14. What should white do? Maybe we should clarify one thing. We got one comment, bad move, a3 kicks it out. Unfortunately for me, on a3, there's knight c3, pawn takes, and knight a2, and I'm having a yard sale. All my stuff is full. So there is a point about a3. But the intention is correct. I would love to play a3. We got queen d2 as a move. Yeah, queen b3, good. Queen b3, then a3. Good, all good comments. Got another vote for queen d2. Maybe knight d5, followed by some kind of a3, also a thought. Yeah. Another vote for queen d2. Well, okay. So let me say all of those are good moves, except a3. I think a3 is a mistake because of knight c3. But otherwise, all those are good moves. And here, I spent 26 minutes. 26 minutes, my friend. And boy, oh boy, did the Soviet yell at me? You better believe the Soviet yelled at me. He yelled at me pretty good. And rightly so. So, and so, you know, let's get inside of this 26 minutes. Unbelievable. So the first thing is, I was surprised by knight cb4. And my first intuition was that it was a bad move. So I got emotional and had somehow, it's like thinking, okay, how can I punish this move, knight cb4? In particular, if the guy ever has to play knight takes c3, then I feel pretty good about my position because those hanging pawns look like they'd be strong. But one of the things that the Soviet said is absolutely true is whether I play queen d2, that's the move I ended up playing, queen b3, queen a4, or even knight takes d5, all of those moves are fine. And the difference between them isn't that significant. But the difference of 26 minutes on the clock, my friend, that is significant. And, you know, when you think about it, it's not like you are going to, like, did my move improve for thinking for 26 minutes? Could I have played queen d2 in under 2 minutes? Well, yeah, you'd think. Right? Right? People are mentioning queen a4. Yeah, I could have played queen a4. Sure. You know. So I'm beating myself up over these details when I need to, first of all, accept that black is okay. And we're just playing a game of chess. And, you know, I need to play queen d2. All right, so I played queen d2. Now, the only tactical thing that I think Black should be wary of is that knight c3, pawn takes, bishop f3 with the intention of playing bishop g5 probably does not work because of gf. Maybe I'll just put that on the board. Boom, 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 boom. Again, if I had played bishop f3, he's got bishop g5, knight d5, and bishop a6. And there's some grief for Black because of the two bishops. It's not the end of the world, but it's not the position that Black wanted. Okay, so if we go back, I have strong feelings here that the move that Black should play is bishop d6. Okay, so let's continue. Knight c3. We got a comment of queen d2 and 1-0 bullet in less than 1 second. Probably, yeah, probably. Okay, hold on, my mic volume. Oh, we got, maybe I'll get in a little closer. I'll get a little closer. I'm not a master of the mic. I'm not a master. Actually, you know what? Let's see here. Okay, I'm gonna worry about the mic. Mic a little bit. The other people saying it sounds fine. Okay, so here, let's move on, and we're gonna get. He took mistake. So you're playing a lower rated opponent, and especially now, I feel like they're not making tactical mistakes. But if they're gonna make some mistakes, it's something like this, where they're giving me some nice dynamic pawns in the center. All right. What should the guy have done? Absolutely bishop d6. And in that position, I'd rather be Black. Now, yeah, I'd just much rather be Black. In fact, and one of the problems is, right, like, it's when you're playing white and you think you deserve something and then you get nothing, then you start thinking forever trying to find something that isn't there. And like I said, queen d2, 26 minutes. Why? Because I'm obsessed over moves like bishop d6, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do about it. Now, he should have played it. Okay, so Black makes, to my mind, his first mistake of the game, knight takes c3. Now, let me just say something about the analysis here. If you've been on this show with me before, you know that I'm an evangelist. An evangelist being I have a message to sell about going over your games. And let me just say, I think the best thing you can do is to go over your games with a notebook. Here's my little notebook here, right? I got some notes. I did 11 pages on this thing without the computer. Then I typed it into ChessBase, sent it off to the Soviet, and the Soviet looked at it. Now, do you absolutely need a coach? No, it's helpful. But at the end, you could also give it to a computer. The computer can also tell you some fine things. Coach costs a little bit of money too. Soviets are cheaper, though, so. In any case, so I want to sell that message to you. Very instructive thing to do. More important than anything else. And one of the things is, like, when you guys are seeing this position, these positions that I'm giving you today, they're just positions. They're just something you're being thrown at. I'm hoping they're instructive. But when you go over your own games, like I have a memory of this position and a knowledge as well of my feelings, and then going over the game is partly in that effort to understand, like, dude, what were you thinking about when you spent 26 minutes on queen d2? All right, let's keep going. Knight d5. Knight e5. Okay, let's talk about this one. Maybe I should have given it as a question. I'll give it as a question. I don't think knight e5 is the best move. So the question will be, what do you think white should do? Maybe knight e5 isn't that bad. Yeah. Knight e5, weren't I scared of knight f6? Well, we're going to see knight f6 is in fact what happens in the game. That's right. And I had kind of calculated a longish line involving knight f6. Well, yeah, it's gonna get interesting. So on this move, I can tell you that I spent 8 minutes. And for the Soviet methodology, this is no good. Why? Because it's not actually a tactical position yet. People do like 95. So let me just say while you guys are thinking about it, after the game, I went over the game, with the board and did my notes. And the thing about going over the game is you will learn stuff about positional play. And one of the things that the Soviets telling me has to do with the time is you're not really going to learn positional stuff at the board. It's not going to happen. And so I'm, sitting there at the board trying to figure it out. And afterwards is the time, if you're going to find something, it's the time to do it. Because then you can learn how to play certain types of positions from a positional standpoint. And you have the time to figure it out. You can really sit there. And there is a time. You can think there about a position like this for hours. Alexander likes c4. Okay, so in my analysis afterwards, the Soviet one, I thought that c4 was a much better move than what I played with knight e5. And I came up with a simple variation of knight f6, queen e3. And I felt that white was a little bit better. Yeah, nice compact position. And the pawns are doing their typical hanging pawns thing where they're controlling all these squares. So it's this interesting thing where I kind of yelled at myself. I'm like, knight e5, taking too long, buddy. And in my notes, I was like, knight e5 incorrect because of black's next move, and you underestimated the following tactical sequence. Well, we'll talk about it. But the Soviet is like, no, dude, no, you took too long. And the difference between knight e5 and c4 is actually pretty small, not that significant. So I was like, Soviet, well, which move was it, buddy? Which move was it that was tactical? And he said, not yet, nothing yet. What was the time control of the game? This was longer than your normal game. This was 2 hours for the whole game plus 30 seconds a move. Normally it's 90 minutes plus 30 seconds. All right. So let me show you what happened. The next is kind of forcing, and I saw this in my mind's eye when I played knight e5. I thought f3 was kind of clever to shut down the bishop on b7 to prevent knight e4. All right, knight h5, bishop h2, bishop h4. Okay. So the interesting thing about chess and intuition here is that my intuition was that black's pieces were ineffectively sidelined, that they were that shouldn't work out, that my centralized pieces should win out over his sideline pieces. And in particular, since the bishop on b7 can't participate in the attack on my king, I shouldn't really worry about it. And so in my analysis, my first reaction was, oh, dude, well, this was incorrect, and the move c4 on move 16 was better because knight e5 leads to this position. And then all of a sudden, after, say, bishop d3, bishop g3, snip, snop, rook e1, and slap, I started to feel uncomfortable. because it feels like black has some dark square stuff. All right, so let's pause for a moment here. The question is simple. What should white do? And who's better and why? I'm going to give a little time. And yeah, if you want to, you can either write something in the chat and I'll read it out anonymously, or you can put an exclam and I'll bring you onto the call. White to play, what should he do? We got in Spanish. I kind of like it. I would play A4 in this position. That's an interesting thought. And, you know, it's totally valid. And we could also ask, you know, what your evaluation is. Got it. We got a C4. Can't do C4 yet because of queen D4, right? Got one comment. Black is better because of easy access to C and D files attacking the weak pawns. Okay, that's a thought. We got one saying bishop E4. Somebody saying G4, very ambitious move. Yeah. And again, it would be instructive if you said when you give a move for white, what you think the evaluation is. Got somebody saying white's plus 0.6. Got one person saying bishop E4 and it's equal. We got a question. Did the game go bishop E4, bishop D5? Not quite, but it's a plausible continuation for sure. We got a comment here that's pretty reasonable. For some reason, this is a tough position to come up with a plan. Indeed, and maybe I was about to say why, but we could, I might leave it to you. King H2 is definitely a thought, though then after Queen H4, it's a little bit questionable, like what we're doing after that. Well, Evan, I read your last Spanish comment. I'm sorry I made you anonymous, but yes, I can read a little Spanish. Not that my Spanish is great or anything. One idea is play Queen C2 and then slide the queen over. Yeah. All right, so while you guys are thinking on it, I'm going to tell you some, you know, on these shows, it's always a little bit, I'm open to just being open with my own terribleness. Here I thought, you guys ready for it? I thought for 16 minutes on this one. Man, oh man, 16 minutes. 16! 16 minutes in this position. Yeah. And let's just say, you know, Black's last move, knight H5, during the game, I thought it was a good practical move. And kind of the question is, should I be worried? Should I be worried about the dark squares over there in terms of counterplay? Or should I not? Or should I not? It's kind of it's kind of an interesting question. You either are worried or you're not. And it's kind of interesting here. I became concerned, and in particular, I wanted to play a game where my opponent had no counterplay. And so the interesting thing about this one is, first of all, it is a rich position. There's no doubt about it. It's a very rich position. And kind of an intuitive question that has to do with a person's chess understanding as well is just, do you feel Black ever has anything on the king side? And maybe you think he does, maybe you think he doesn't. But if you don't think he does, then you just have to trust that. You know, you look at some variations and stuff. But, you know, ultimately, that's going to be just a question of how you want to do things. So, for example, the Soviet, he's not worried at all. He's not concerned at all. And it's hilarious the way the guy puts things. He's just like, well, because of my superior chess understanding, I know. He didn't actually quite talk like this. This is just my Russian accent. I know that there will never be any danger with just 2 pieces on the king's side, right? And I kind of like that attitude. And if you have that attitude, then one of the first comments in chat is correct. Namely, you should play A4. Just play A4 and tell Black that A5 is coming, and you don't care at all about the stuff he's doing there on the king's side. But the bigger point, okay, is, dude, this is ultimately an intuitive move here. So whether you could play bishop E4, you could play something like A4, you could play even some weird move like rook C2, rook E2. In the end, dude, it doesn't matter. You got to move it, buddy. You could play bishop F1. So my move, I don't think is terrible. I played bishop E4. It's kind of interesting. And it gives, and one of the things that's actually also a feature of this move is, as long as, you know, White convinces himself that there's no danger, no tactical danger that Black can like hit me with something, then the move's fine. But it's not a move I'm calculating anything, because think about it. As someone pointed out in the chat, maybe dude could play bishop D5. Maybe he should. He could think about bishop A6. He could think about queen E7. He, of course, can think about taking it. So with all these things, you know, I can't, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? You're not going to calculate all that stuff out. So it's just an intuitive decision if you end up playing bishop E4. And the 16 minutes, you will need it later when it's time to start calculating some stuff, as I did. Okay. Great question. Wasn't bishop D3 better than bishop B7? Yes, I totally agree with you. And one of the reasons, actually, this has everything to do with time. When you spend forever on a move, it usually suggests that you're unhappy about something. And the Soviet's all about getting rid of my emotions. He wants to turn me into a machine, man. And this stuff about unhappiness, he's not interested in my happiness. He's not interested in anybody's happiness. And so bishop E4, if I come to play it, I'm with you or not. I don't really want to trade the bishop on B7. And the idea is, well, now I will have to worry simply a little bit less, especially if he takes the thing, because it will be easier for me to control the attack in quotation marks, on the king side. Because does Black have an attack? Not really, dude. I don't think so. So, you know, the Soviet move here is just to play A4 and say, I don't care. I don't think you're doing anything to me over there. And, you know, it's bold and everything. And it just says, no, you're not going to, on a principled level, I understand that two pieces are never going to crack me over there on the king side. Okay, so, but bishop e4, not a bad move. It's not so bad. The problem was taking forever on the move. That was the problem. All right, black took. I probably shouldn't take. Probably he should play one of you guys' moves. Queen e7, bishop d5, one of those moves. Snip. Queen h4. And now I'll say I felt that was a little bit better. Okay, so queen h4. All right, what should I do? Another position. What should I do with this position? I'll give you guys a moment. What should white play? And we got a question. We got some people saying rook e3, queen f2. Question is, what is the theme of today's class? It's a follow-up on my last lecture, which was separating the tactical from the non-tactical. And today, what I'm doing is I'm using a game I played to illustrate the problems of not separating the tactical from the non-tactical. We got d5 as a question. And another verse says d5. d5 exclam, pass pawns must be pushed. I think Austin wants to come on. Let's bring in Austin. And he's going to tell us about why d5 should be played.
Well, this is an old adag. The pass pawns must be pushed. And especially true in this position, that pawn must be pushed. Look at all of black's pieces. They're all sidelined on the rim. Well, it's a perfect opportunity to smash through in the middle, especially with the powerful knight on e5. So we push d5. And I don't think he really wants to take and open the e-file for the rook. He's probably going to play rook d8, but then we move our inactive rook on c1 to d1 behind that pawn, and then we push it all the way down, probably d6 or d7, and tie down black's pieces. And his attack is basically non-existent. And if black tries to trade the queens, we're actually going to avoid the trade of queens because we have more space. And if we trade the queens, then that space advantage is probably going to be diminished. So if d5 and queen f4, I was suggesting queen d4 to centralize the queen. And black isn't really going to checkmate because he only has two pieces over there.
Okay, good. Thank you. I think that's a really insightful perspective. So in this position, I spent 7 minutes, and that was precisely my quandary. Do I play queen f2? Let's put an arrow here. Do I play queen f2 or do I play d5? And, you know, later on in my analysis, I decided that d5 was insane, but for reasons, you know, and the reason was on d5, I found the move knight f4. And the bummer is he's threatening two things. Knight h3 followed by queen g3 picking up the knight, and also queen g5 talking to the knight and threatening knight h3. So it's definitely a bummer. And, you know, so let me imagine myself. I'm sitting at the board and I'm like, oh, I want to beat this guy. And d5 feels like a violent way to try to finish him off. And interestingly, I showed this to the Soviet, and the Soviet was like, no, no, you play queen f2 and you do it within a minute, buddy. Within a minute, because you know that you have better pieces after queen f2, and d5 loosens the position at a spot in the game where you don't need to loosen the position, or nor do you want to. And where you will lose control of the complications after d5 as well. Now, here's the thing. In the game, I ultimately had that sense that d5 was insane, but the problem was it took me 7 minutes, and then I finally played the natural move that I should be playing, queen f2. Okay. Queen f2, king f2, knight f4. All right, simple question, my friends. What should white play in this position? And that's right, Timothy. Your variation is correct. That knight h3 is definitely a thing. Yeah, white to play. What should he do? Evans, we got somebody saying offer a draw. I hope it's a joke. No draw. No draw. What should white play in this position? Any thoughts about what I should do here? Also, maybe ask yourself what your intuition about who is better and why in this position. We got one comment to do, rook e3, a4, a5. And while you're thinking about me, address a question that's very important. How is your opponent on time? And do you think it should affect how much time you spend? Well, here's the interesting thing. I don't know, you guys are much younger, obviously, and I don't know what kind of drugs you guys use, but I know that your generation does stuff like the Adderall and all this other modafinil drugs and stuff like that we didn't have. I didn't have when I was a kid, you know. And if you don't know it, you don't use those drugs. You probably have friends that do. In any case, what am I trying to say? This kid I'm playing, he's not a kid. I don't know. He's probably 18, 19 years old. He was taking forever. He was taking absolutely forever. And the reason I brought up the modafinil thing is I don't know if he was on it or anything, but I know that when you're on those drugs, the only thing I really understand about it is you play better moves when you're on it because you're hyper focused. You are hyper focused, but the downside is that you end up taking forever. So this guy, oh my gosh, he was down to 1 minute already. And so one of the things that the Soviet had no sympathy for me on was I was spending time, but I was always aware that I was up a significant amount of time compared to my opponent. I was always up like 30 minutes, you know, and now my opponent with 1 minute left. By the way, you can play forever now. Just because you have 1 minute left doesn't mean you can't play reasonable moves. You still got 30 seconds every move. So the amount of time I was spending, which was ridiculous, was based on kind of a sensibility of like, oh, I'm up compared to my opponent, which was kind of like a dumb thing to do. Only think in situations, only think for a long time, clock time, when there's something to calculate. That is when you need to be hyper-focused on your business. Otherwise, it's an intuitive decision. Are the intuitive decisions interesting? Yes, they are. And can you spend a long time thinking about them? Yes, you can, but you do it after the game in your notes, and you learn how to think about certain types of positions, and you get good at playing them. Totally different thing, though, than what we're dealing with here. Okay, so in this position, to my mind, King F3 is the only move, and I spent forever thinking about this move. Let's think. I wrote all these things down. I spent 5 minutes, which is even, you know, it sounds like not too much, but now that I'm down, after this, I'm down to 26 minutes for the rest of the game. And so, you know, 5 minutes out of, 30 is a lot. And why am I thinking forever? Because I was obsessed with black playing G5, and I wanted to have some kind of move to do against G5. But King F3, look, it's obviously the best move. Dude, you got to play King F3. The guy's threatening F6. And then you have to play, you got the knight D3 problem, So play King F3, dude. Way too long on that move. And then the guy doesn't even play G5 and instantly plays knight G6. Okay, now let's talk about this. got a great comment. I had an opponent who drank 7 cans of Coke in a game. Cristiano Ronaldo doesn't drink Coke. You shouldn't either. Okay, what should White do? What should White do? Now, in this position, I'm going to go ahead and say I spent only 1 minute on this move. What should White play here? We got one comment to take it. Now, what should White do in this position? Got a lot of people wanting me to take that thing. Daniel saying, excuse me. So we got a comment saying, no way 93 is that good. Another person saying to take. Okay. So here's the funny thing. Taking is by all means, let's call it the natural move. And let's just look at the resulting position for a second. You know, I think first glance, you would definitely believe that White is better simply because our pawns are closer to the edge of the board. Our king is more active, you know? So just on that glance, you'd be like, dude, come on. Of course we're better. Let's go a little deeper, though. There is a move that White must play. There's a move White must play, or else he's going to be close to worse, which is c4. Good. Now, I want you to look at this position for a second. Use your understanding. How can Black make a fighting game out of this position? Right here. E5. Very good. We found it. E5. And that's the move that when I saw it, it's like a horror show. Yeah, it's a horror show for White all of a sudden. If I play D5, then it's already really bad. I'm probably going to lose the pawn on C4. This rook is cruising over. This king easily comes and blockades any attempt to run the G pawn. I'd already be worse. Now, I'm not lost or anything. I can play a move like rook ED1, but of course, no one wants to get their pawn smashed. You know, the integrity of my pawn smashed. So it's already a very unpleasant situation. So let's go back. In this position, could I have seen that? Perhaps, but I would have needed some time to obviously to see c4. First of all, you know, I knew that I was going to play c4, but that e5 was then going to be this big deal for me on the horizon. And you know, it takes a little bit, definitely some skill to be aware that that's my problem. And knight d3, it's not like White's winning or anything, but the beauty of this move is you just have a simple claim that your pieces are still better. If rook c4, if I need to, I can play knight b2. And our pawns, this is the claim anyway, our pawns are dominating the Black knight. It's nothing a hugely special position for White. But if you see that e5 idea, well, dude, then you play knight d3. Okay, so I played snip, snop, c4. And here, really, my opponent, you know, no time. First plays rook fd8 and king e3. And now again, he can still play e5. Should and could. He should. He could and should. That's what I meant to say. Instead, he plays king f8. And I play e5. Okay. So now here's the thing. My whole game plan, if you will, for playing against you young kids, and this is the Soviets too, all of us old guys, we just want to get an end game because in general, you all's end games are terrible. Sorry to say it. But That's not to say that they're that bad, but more to the point that if we have a chance to beat you kids, this is the only chance we got. And now after E5, I'm a little bit better. And I've got 16 minutes left. The kids got still 1. And the bummer here is I'm about to, I play several moves good. And so there's 2 narratives of why this game gets blown for me. One, like I said, I didn't have the energy to finish. You know, they start these games way late at night, so it's very ageist against us old guys. Us old guys, man, we get up at like 6 o'clock in the morning. So you get a round that starts at 7 o'clock at night, man. It's rough for us old guys, man. We're ready for bed. You guys just are waking up. So, anyways, you know, it's late at night. I can make an excuse for myself, whatever. And I need it, and whether it's an excuse or not, if I'm going to play these tournaments, I obviously need the ability to play late at night and all this stuff. In any case, so there's that. But let's say the obvious. I'm going to need, you know, even here, even though it feels like there's going to be intuitive decisions, it's actually now where things become very concrete. And, you know, things are going to be very real. Now, my opponent plays passively, which is cardinal rule number 1 of what you shouldn't do. And what he allows me to do is shut his counterplay down. And the Soviet was very happy with this. This is the one time the Soviet had a smile on his face, because Black should have played F6 or F5 at several points earlier on. Now, would Black have been, let's say, mildly worse? Probably. But now I thought, and the Soviet thought, that Black is now lost. But I'm down to, what am I got? 7 minutes left. Okay. Rook E7, A4, Rook C7. And let me give you guys a moment to ask yourself, what should White do in this position? And the question is, was this from cherry blossom? And then we have another question. What is a cherry blossom? The cherry blossom is a tree that blooms in BC around this time of year. And the Cherry Blossom Open is a very strong 9-round GM norm tournament that happens every year. Didn't happen in 2020 due to pandemic. And this was, for myself and for many others, their first tournament back in forever. And so that was the Cherry Blossom Open. And I assume some of the people in this class were probably at that tournament. We had to wear masks. It was dreadful. It was absolutely dreadful. Okay, what should White play here? Got a good comment. You have to make another weakness with A5 eventually, as F7 isn't enough to win. Another comment, try to push H5 with Rook H1 or something. Yeah. A5 now, but getting ready for D5. Yeah. Okay. So here's a fun variation that I found in the notes, and it would be the kind of thing that you would definitely need time on the clock to do it. And I want to say the following idea was definitely in the back of my mind. And that is to play H5. And I know you guys grew up with computers and stuff, and you probably think that the name Nimzovich means nothing. But let me tell you a very basic Nimzovichian idea that's kind of at play here. It's kind of a beautiful thing, and then I'll show you the variation. Nimzovich had the incredibly deep insight that when you stop your opponent from doing what he wants to do, and in this case, what have I done? I've stopped him from playing F6. That prevention ultimately turns into aggression. It's a very deep concept, and it's not immediately intuitive, because you'd say, wait a second, you're stopping somebody from doing something they want to do. Why does that mean that it turns into something for you? Well, I'll just say this is a great example of it. So I'm stopping F6, and now H5 is the move I should have played, but I would have needed time to figure this out. GH, G6, rook check, and now D5 exclamation. Very nice move. And the point is, let's say rook snap, rook snap. First of all, if king E7, there's the horrendous D6, ending the game immediately. And on H4, something like H4, you could imagine G5 is very similar. White plays the simplistic but very strong, super strong rook G8. And I'm just going to take everything. I'm taking everything. It's a yard sale for black. Everything's falling. But, this is the kind of position it would take, it takes a little bit of creativity to that. Well, let me just say, I knew that something like that was what I was aiming for, but getting it right and finding ideas like this final thing with rook G8, and you have to see the idea that if king E7, you've got D6, all that is tactical stuff that really does require calculation. And one of the reasons I wanted to show this variation is we've been talking, there's so many decisions in this game that didn't require time. They really didn't, because they weren't like this. They weren't something where you have to come up with a conception and then some deep variations. They weren't that way, and a lot of quiet positions, maneuvering play is like that. There's good moves and bad moves in maneuvering chess, but they're not going to be something where you really have to dig deep and find variations. That is an example of where you should spend time, where I should have spent time. But like I said, I'd spent all my time on all these other ridiculous moves. I played rook C1. Am I still winning? Yes. Here I played king E4, which is not great. And a very nice move that I like a lot here is this one. Boom, boom, boom. And the insight here is simply that black is really in Zugzwang. He can't even move. Rook C4, rook takes F7, just too strong. Too strong. And what is he going to do? He can't play king E7, can't play king F8. I still got moves like H5 on the horizon. And again, this would be the kind of thing that would need time in order to play this correctly. We have the question, was that line objectively winning? I did think so, yes. And I think this one is also objectively winning. The Soviet, by the way, who is an expert in rook endgames, was just like, dude, this is totally winning. You don't have to be that fancy. Now for him, it's easy. He's an endgame expert. Okay, so let me tell you, to my horror, how this thing ended. This is not a pleasant thing for me to admit. I went here, and then here, blundering. Now, I still have 5 minutes left, but I'm terrified. I'm terrified of the time pressure. And I thought that he couldn't take because I had this. But he can take, dude. And then after this, of course, he can play rook F8. So am I lost? I am. I'm lost in this position. Dvoretsky is unfortunately dead. My coach, I think, is stronger than Dvoretsky in terms of the end games. But they are both Soviets. And I'm going to teach you guys a dirty jam trick. My opponent was down in time here. And I did a dirty thing, and I offered him a draw. He took it. But I am dead lost. Dead lost with a move like rook F8. It might look kind of passive, but honestly, everything's falling over here. It's a yard sale over here. Once the second one of my rooks move away, he's going to go back to rook D8. Okay. So my opponent was rated like 400 points below me or something. It was the kind of game where I'm expected to win. But let's just say he didn't play a bad game. He played, and he didn't make any tactical mistakes that I could see. He made some positional mistakes. In particular, here you see he played the rook endgame passively. But I feel like that's you guys' generation. You might make some positional mistakes, but you're not really making the tactical mistakes. So I'm going to leave it there. And the simple message is this: A, go over your games. B, that when you spend forever on a move that's in a non-tactical situation, it's watch yourself in the sense that look yourself in the mirror and say, am I doing this out of psychological reasons? And the answer, I think, in general, is yes. You're doing it for psychological reasons. You're unhappy with the position. You're like spinning in a circle, unhappy with life, and you're trying to find something that isn't there. And in those positions, honestly, you just got to force yourself to do it. Now, it's easy advice to give. And in fact, before this tournament, I was on this very same US Chess School broadcast. You can see the video on YouTube. Did I give the advice? I did. Did I follow it? Apparently not. The Soviet yelled at me. I didn't do good, man. The Soviet yelled at me, said, "Nobody, you really blew it this time." At least he hopes I learned something from him. And the simple thing to get out of that is with a lot of things in chess, you can say things, but turning it into practice, much harder business. Okay, everybody, I'm going to stop it there. And if you were watching this on YouTube, you can watch the previous episode there on the Chess Dojo site. And I'll probably be back in a month or so if they let me after this performance. Who knows if they let me. And I'll see you guys then. And yeah, bye-bye, everybody.